All right, buckle up, everybody, because we are going deep, deep into ancient Israel this time.
Yeah.
To see how it all fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
You guys wanted to know about the fall of ancient Israel.
Right.
And, well, we're going to look at some pretty dramatic chapters in the Book of Kings.
Yeah, some action-packed chapters for sure.
Yeah, I think political chaos, assassinations, some seriously big life lessons.
Yeah.
We've got chapters 15 through 17 of 2 Kings all queued up.
Okay.
And those cover the reigns of a bunch of different kings in the northern kingdom of Israel, leading up to Assyria coming in and taking them over.
Right. You know what's really interesting here is that
Yeah.
the source material doesn't just present this as like, just the facts, man.
Right.
It frames this whole downfall as like a direct consequence of the Israelites turning away from God.
Okay.
It's really a cautionary tale woven into, the historical narrative.
It's not just, okay, these rulers were bad.
Right.
They made bad decisions.
It's not just bad leadership.
There's a
spiritual dimension.
a deeper thing going on here.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to understand that, we really need to unpack this phrase that keeps coming up.
Okay.
Did evil in the sight of the Lord.
Right.
And that, it's not just about being a bad king generally.
Mm-hmm.
It's specifically referring to actions that go against God's commandments.
Okay.
And the covenant he made with his people.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
We're starting with King Menahem, ruled for 10 years.
Okay.
The text doesn't hold back.
Right.
Calls him out for his brutality, oppression, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what did he actually do that earned him this label?
So, while the text doesn't get super specific about all the details of all the things he did,
Okay.
it does mention that he followed in the footsteps of Jeroboam II, who, is repeatedly condemned for basically leading Israel into idolatry.
Okay.
So this really suggests that Menahem continued those practices, worshiping false gods, encouraging people to do the same.
So basically he's ditching the one true God.
Yeah, pretty much.
For idols.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, what were the people thinking?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
What leads people to abandon their faith and embrace practices that are like, clearly condemned in their own scriptures?
Yeah.
Is it fear? Is it a desire for something new? Do they think the old ways aren't working anymore?
Right.
It's complicated, but it's something you see throughout history. It's like over and over again.
It kind of feels like Game of Thrones, but with like a whole spiritual layer to it.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And then it gets crazier. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because his son, Pekahiah, he doesn't last long
No, he does not.
on the throne at all.
Uh-uh.
Yeah, he's assassinated by Pekah,
Yeah, that's
who then takes over this whole assassination thing.
Right.
That shows just how violent
Yeah.
and unstable
Exactly.
the Northern Kingdom was at this time.
Mm-hmm. And the text really connects that, to their turning away from God.
But isn't that different than like Game of Thrones?
How do you
Like in Game of Thrones, it's all about raw power, right?
Yeah.
But here, it seems like these kings really believed in these other gods, which is messed up on a whole other level.
Yeah. It's a different kind of motivation.
So Pekah takes over.
Right.
Does he try to like course correct?
Well,
Get back in God's good graces?
sadly, no.
No.
He keeps going down the same path.
Oh, well.
Forming alliances with nations that were hostile to God's people and just engaging in practices that totally contradicted God's commandments.
Okay, so this is where King Ahaz of Judah comes in. He's not even in the northern kingdom, right?
No, he's not.
So how did he get mixed up in all this?
So Ahaz was the king,
Okay.
the southern kingdom, Judah.
Okay.
And he gets involved when Pekah teams up with another king,
Okay.
Rezin of Aram,
Okay.
to attack Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Basically trying to force Ahaz into their anti-Assyrian alliance.
So, wait, we're talking about 2 kingdoms here.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how did Ahaz even get involved if he wasn't even
He be in the northern kingdom.
the northern kingdom?
Right. He was the king of the southern kingdom, Judah.
Okay.
But basically, Pekah of Israel teams up with this other guy, Rezin of Aram.
Okay.
And they're trying to attack Jerusalem and force him into this alliance.
So things are really heating up now.
Yeah, it's getting intense.
2 kings against 1. And Ahaz is, like, stuck in the middle?
Right.
What does he do?
So with this, overwhelming threat,
Yeah.
Ahaz makes a decision that, well, it has some big consequences.
Okay.
He decides to ask the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser for help.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Isn't Assyria like the bigger threat here?
Well,
why would he turn to them?
That's the irony of it all. Ahaz is so desperate to avoid being conquered by these smaller kingdoms that he basically, walks right into the hands of a much more powerful empire.
Yeah.
And to secure this alliance, he sends Tiglath-Pileser this huge tribute.
Okay.
Basically, emptying out the temple and the royal treasury.
Wow, so not exactly a shining example of faith in God, huh? I mean, he's the king of Judah, God's chosen people.
Right.
And he's basically saying, forget you, God.
Yeah.
I'm going with the big guns.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Ahaz's actions, they really reflect a complete lack of trust in God's ability to protect his people. He's putting his faith in, worldly power. Politics, rather than relying on the God who, made his kingdom in the first place.
But it gets worse, right?
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't just seek help from Assyria. He embraces their religious practices, too.
You got it.
Right.
The text describes how he adopted these Assyrian ways of worship.
Oh, wow.
Even going so far as to sacrifice his own son.
Wow.
In this, pagan ritual.
He sacrificed his own son. That's dark.
Yeah, this is a turning point in the narrative.
Right.
This horrific act that really underscores how far these kings had gone.
It's hard to even understand, this king, he's chosen by God, and he's doing something so terrible.
Yeah.
What was he thinking?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just so terrified of the Assyrians that he had to appease their gods. Or maybe he'd really lost all faith in the God of his ancestors. Yeah. Whatever the reason, his actions had devastating consequences for himself and for the kingdom of Judah.
This feels like a good place to stop for a second.
Okay.
And let all that sink in.
Yeah, I agree.
Ahaz's story, it really shows what can happen when you put your faith in the wrong things.
Right.
We'll be back in a minute to continue our deep dive into the fall of Israel.
Okay.
See how this all played out.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back, you guys.
So before the break, we were talking about Ahaz, king of Judah.
Yeah.
And how he basically turned to the Assyrian king for protection, even embracing their gods.
Right.
And sacrificing his own son in this pagan ritual.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a more dramatic departure from the faith of his ancestors.
It's wild. Talk about a cautionary tale.
For sure.
But even though he bought himself some time, some peace.
Right. His actions ultimately backfired.
Exactly.
Right.
By aligning himself with Assyria. Ahaz basically made Judah a vassal state.
Okay.
Subject to their demands, their influence.
So he's trading one problem for an even bigger problem.
Pretty much.
And meanwhile, back in the Northern Kingdom, things are still a mess. Pekah is assassinated.
Right.
Hoshea takes the throne.
Yep.
Is he any different?
So it's interesting. Hoshea, he initially shows signs of trying to reform.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the text mentions that he removes the idols that Jeroboam had put up, which suggests that he's trying to go back to a pure form of worship. He even starts paying tribute to Assyria, acknowledging their power.
So maybe a glimmer of hope here.
Yeah, it seems like he's trying to set things right.
Does Israel turn things around?
Well, sadly, no. While his initial actions seemed promising,
he falls back into the same pattern
of
disobedience.
Oh, man.
He stops paying tribute to Assyria and tries to make an alliance with Egypt.
Wait, Egypt?
Yeah.
That seems risky.
It was a gamble.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, they'd been enemies for centuries. Right. Why would he turn to them for help?
Well, it's probably a few things. Politically, it was a desperate attempt to break free from Assyria. He may have been hoping that Egypt would be a powerful ally.
Right.
But there might also be this spiritual dimension to it.
What do you mean by spiritual dimension?
Well, throughout their history, The Israelites had repeatedly turned to other nations for help.
Right.
Instead of trusting God.
Right.
This alliance with Egypt, it's kind of like a repeat of that pattern, relying on worldly powers instead of, seeking guidance and protection from God.
So they're making the same mistakes as their ancestors.
Pretty much.
Always looking for someone else to save them instead of trusting in God.
Right.
And this time, it really backfires.
Tragically, yeah. The Assyrians, led by King Shalmaneser V, they lay siege to Samaria, the capital of Israel, after a brutal 3-year siege.
Oh, wow.
The city falls.
Okay.
The Israelites are defeated, taken captive, and exiled.
So that's it for the Northern Kingdom?
Yeah, it's the end.
Wow.
As an independent nation, it just ceases to exist.
That's incredible. It's hard to even imagine that kind of devastation.
Yeah.
A whole nation wiped off the map. And the text is very clear about why this happened.
Absolutely.
Right.
The author of 2 Kings, he's not holding back.
Yeah.
He says straight up that the downfall of Israel was because of their idolatry and rejection of God.
So they abandoned their relationship with God, embraced the ways of their neighbors, ignored the prophets.
And their actions had consequences.
Yeah. Big ones. It's a reminder that our choices matter.
They do.
And the consequences of, straying from our values can be devastating, not just for ourselves, but for whole nations.
Exactly.
But you said earlier that this isn't just ancient history.
Right.
So how does this apply to us today?
Well, we're not building golden calves or offering sacrifices to pagan gods.
Right.
But the concept of idolatry, it's still relevant.
Okay.
Think about it. The core principle here is the danger of putting anything above God in our lives.
Okay.
Back then it was idols, wood and stone.
Yeah.
But today, those idols, they can take many forms.
So what are some of the idols that we need to watch out for?
Well, think about what our culture values most.
Okay.
Wealth, status, power, success, possessions, even physical appearance. All these things can become idols if we let them define our worth or control us.
Okay, but isn't there a difference between, wanting to be successful and making an idol out of it?
Oh, absolutely.
Ambition, hard work, those are good things.
Of course. There's nothing wrong with wanting to achieve your goals.
Right.
But it's about keeping things in perspective.
Okay.
It's about asking yourself, what's driving my ambition? Am I pursuing success? No matter what, even if it means compromising my values or neglecting my relationship with God.
So it's not about rejecting success.
No.
It's about making sure it doesn't take over your whole life. And this applies to other things too, right?
Yeah.
Relationships, good causes.
Absolutely.
We can get so focused on those things that they consume us.
Yeah.
And we forget about everything else.
It's about balance.
Yeah.
Making sure nothing, no matter how good it seems, becomes more important than our connection with God.
This is really making me think.
Yeah, me too.
About my own life, my priorities. I'm sure it's doing the same for our listeners.
I hope so.
Let's pause for a second here.
Okay.
Give everyone a chance to think about what we've talked about.
It's good.
We'll be back shortly to wrap up our deep dive into the fall of Israel.
Looking forward to it.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the fall of Israel. We've been talking about some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, we have.
Like political intrigue and assassinations and a spiritual decline of a whole nation.
It's a lot.
It's fascinating, but also kind of unsettling.
It is. But like we've been saying, it's not just ancient history.
Right.
There are some big lessons here for us.
Yeah. Sure. So let's recap what we've learned.
Yes.
We saw this pattern with the kings of Israel.
Right.
Each one straying further from God. Their disobedience led to instability, conflict, and then ultimately being conquered by the Assyrians.
And the text is so clear about why this happened.
Yeah.
Idolatry.
And remember, this wasn't just about bowing down to statues.
Right. It was about putting anything, wealth, power, alliances, above their relationship with God.
And that's where it gets tricky for us today.
Yeah, because those same temptations, they're still around.
We may not have golden calves, but we have our own versions.
Exactly. Think about how much our culture values. Success, status, possessions, looks.
Right.
Those things can easily become idols.
Yeah, if we let them...
If we let them define us, control us.
So it's not about rejecting those things completely.
No, not at all.
But keeping them in perspective.
Exactly.
Making sure our priorities are straight.
And that our values are really our own.
Right. Not just what society tells us.
Exactly. And that takes real self-reflection. Being honest about what motivates us. What we're chasing after.
What we're putting our trust in.
Yeah, because it's easy to get caught up in things that seem important, but don't actually bring lasting happiness.
Okay, so how do we actually live that out?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about always checking your motivation, your choices.
Yeah.
Are you chasing success at any cost?
Right.
Even if it means compromising your values or neglecting your relationship?
Are you so focused on a goal that you've lost sight of what really matters?
Right. It's a constant balancing act.
It is.
Striving for excellence.
Yes.
But staying grounded in what we believe in.
Whether it's faith, family, whatever.
Exactly.
And it's not always easy.
It's not. We'll stumble. We'll get caught up in things.
Right.
But the key is to recognize it. Realign our priorities.
Get back on track.
Yeah. Get back to what really matters.
So this story of Israel falling apart, it's a warning.
It is.
But also kind of hopeful.
Because it reminds us that even when we mess up, we can always find our way back.
Get back to what matters most.
Yeah, and it pushes us to look at our own lives.
Right.
And make sure we're not making those same mistakes.
It's a call to really think about what we're doing.
To live intentionally, choose what we worship carefully, and build our lives on something solid.
Wow, that's a powerful way to wrap things up.
It's been a great conversation.
I hope this deep dive has given everyone something to think about.
Me too.
A new perspective on this ancient story and how it connects to our lives today.
Yeah, it's all connected.
So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning.
Keep diving deep.
And we'll see you on the next